Hey class, let's take a look at today's assignment. To do today's assignment, there's about a 5-page reading from our text, The Washington Journey, that goes over the growth of cities. You'll need to do that reading and then complete a 10-question quiz at the end. Should be pretty simple and straightforward. I want to cover some of this for you guys in the video because I think some of you may learn better when I explain it in the video. To understand the growth of cities, and we're talking about the 3 largest cities in the state today, mainly Seattle, Tacoma, and Spokane. You need to know some terms beginning with rural and urban. Rural means having the characteristics of the countryside. So if you go out in the country and there's not a lot of houses and there's farms, that's rural. Urban means, having the characteristics of a city. Downtowns, lots of houses close together, lots of stores, lots of businesses, lots of traffic, lots of streets. That's a city. That's urban. Okay, urbanization refers to the transformation of small communities into cities. For example, as I said yesterday, the population of Wenatchee in 1890 was about 400 people. Within 20 years, by 1910, it was about 7 to 10,000. Okay, that was urbanization. Wenatchee went from becoming more of a rural area to more of an urban area. Now, it could still be said that Wenatchee is more rural than urban in comparison to a large city like Seattle, but as it continues to grow, there's urbanization. Okay, makes sense? Couple charts and graphs on the first page that are fairly interesting. If you look at the population growth in this state, in 1880, the population of the entire state was only 75,000 people. That's about the population of the Wenatchee Valley right now, including Cashmere and Malaga, Rock Island, and of course Wenatchee and East Wenatchee. So the entire state only held 75,000. But within 30 years, in 1910, there were over 1 million people living in the state. And much of that state's growth was fueled by the growth of Tacoma, Seattle, and Spokane. And as we learned yesterday, a lot of that had to do with railroads. Tacoma was the first to benefit from a railroad because it got the first railroad terminal on the Pacific coast. Okay, the first railroad that came through, the Northern Pacific Railroad. There was a lot of jockeying back and forth to see if Seattle or Tacoma would get that railroad terminal. They chose Tacoma, and it caused Tacoma to grow extremely fast. Seattle continued to grow because both cities had a seaport, but Tacoma got the railroad terminal, and it also built a large sawmill there because of the lumber trade. And so having that terminal was a big deal, and it kept Tacoma fairly even with Seattle. If you look at the growth there, in 1880, there were about 1,000 people in Tacoma, about 3,500 in Seattle. Look, the growth. Tacoma grew to 36, Seattle grew to 42. So the growth was relatively equal. Well, things changed after that when Seattle got a railroad terminal. After the Northern Pacific sold out to James Hill and the Great Northern Railroad, the Great Northern built a terminal in Seattle. And after that, the Union Pacific built a terminal in Seattle. So there were 2 there. So it brought a lot more people and a lot more trade in and out of Seattle. But the thing that really caused Seattle to grow was the Klondike Gold Rush in Alaska. Okay. And you can still go downtown to Pioneer Square, which is in the old part of downtown in Seattle. And you can still take what's called an underground tour and go see a lot of the areas that exist and little things that are still around from old Seattle. And you can experience a little bit of that feel of what it was like during the gold rush. So a lot of people were buying goods before they went to Alaska to go on their quest to discover gold. And Seattle was the last stop before they went north. And so it caused a lot of people to come from the Midwest and the East to Seattle, and even from the South, where there had been a gold rush in California, to come to Seattle. And that was their last stop before they headed up to Alaska in their quest for riches, which they didn't always get. But they spent a lot of money in Seattle and caused it to grow vastly in all ways, with industry, but mostly with stores because of the number of goods, just cooking utensils, tools, clothing, food. Everybody was buying that stuff, and they were buying it in Seattle before they went to Alaska. So it brought people here, and a lot of those people stayed. Now, did they all go to Alaska? No, some stayed, and some started to trade around Seattle. Tacoma got jobs, grew up, had families, more people, more population. So that caused Seattle to grow a lot. Okay, one store that still remains that was built by a man named John Nordstrom. He took $13,000 of gold that he got and started a shoe store. Okay, that is the Nordstrom department store chain that's nationwide now that still is in existence. A very high quality chain of stores that, when I was a younger kid, it was mainly known for shoes and really high end clothing. It's more mainstream now, but there are still several of those in the Seattle area. Okay. And so Nordstrom's came out of that, as did several other stores. So that's kind of the growth of Seattle. The growth of Spokane was a little bit different. Spokane grew originally because obviously there was a lot of lumber around there, but they needed to be able to run sawmills, and they built Spokane right next to Spokane Falls, and that water was used to power sawmills. Okay, and so the water power produced Spokane's first electricity, and it also produced the means for some of the first manufacturing of lumber from timber in the area, and it caused it to grow. But the thing that really caused Spokane to grow was the discovery of silver in the Coeur d'Alene region and also in British Columbia. Coeur d'Alene is in Idaho, and a lot of people poured into Idaho and a lot of people poured into British Columbia looking to find silver. Okay, and that silver mining, again, Spokane was similar to how Seattle was during the Klondike Gold Rush. A lot of people bought their goods in Spokane and used that as a base to go to Idaho and to go to British Columbia to try and get silver. So if you look at that period of time, okay, the three big cities, Seattle, Tacoma, Spokane, they all had some things in common. They all had railroad stations. Okay, Tacoma got the first one. Seattle got two after that, and Spokane got two as the Northern Pacific and Great Northern Railroad lines went through Spokane as well. So they all had railroads. They all had timber industry around them that grew, but they all had things that brought people to the region. First of all, the railroads in all three cases, the Klondike Gold Rush for Seattle, and then silver minings for Spokane. So that's a little bit of an introduction to how the people got to those three places, why they were there, and why those three cities grew as big as they are. And they are still the three biggest cities in the state. Seattle, by far, is the largest city in the state. It's one of the top 20 largest cities in the United States. Spokane is the second largest city in the state, and then Tacoma. Okay, so that's the lesson for today. Pretty much everything covered in the quiz I've gone through. There are a couple things you need to do the reading for. I encourage you to read through this. It's fairly interesting. It's stuff you need to know. There are also some additional questions on our assessments that come from this reading. So go ahead, read the 5 pages, take the quiz, and you're done for the day. Check back in for the exit ticket. Hope everybody has a good day. If you have questions, hit me up.